I shouldn't start till January.
He's on the economic.
Okay, we're live. Folks.
Not yet. Not on my end.
I'll get it.
I do now. It took me a minute. Yeah.
You spoke too loud, spoke too soon.
Yes.
We thought he ran away from us.
I tried. We didn't think we were doing that. Hanky tripped me and turned me around, told me I had to go back.
So, you ready? Call the meeting to order. A roll call, please.
Sullivan. Here. Nick Carmona.
Here.
Juan Gonzalez.
Here.
Brian Campbell.
Here.
Sam Robinson.
Here.
Ian Bruno.
Here.
Dave O'Brien.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Second order of business is I need a motion to approve the minutes of November 2023 IDA board meeting. Can I have such a motion? So moved. Mr. Campbell, do I have a second? Second by Jenny. And
He looked at me and said, Jenny, that's okay.
I have peripheral vision. I can see
Either
everyone.
way you wanted it. I've been called.
Any omissions and corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Joe Scott. Joe is going to give us a snapshot of bonds. And he's also going to put together a presentation, perhaps come up and give another discussion to members of the board who are interested in hearing more in January. So, Joe, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you. I asked the chair how long he wanted me to speak. I could speak for an hour on this topic. I could speak for 3 hours on this topic. I could speak for 10 minutes on this topic. And what I'm going to try to do is keep this to 10 to 15, and then hopefully have the opportunity to come up and meet with all of you and maybe hand out some paper, maybe have a fancy, slideshow, have a little bit of a give and take on by way of Q&A. And by the way, I don't have a written down set of remarks here. So if you have a question, if something that I say doesn't make sense, please interrupt. I'm A-okay with questions on the fly. So from a starting point standpoint, when people say to me or ask me, what kind of benefits or what can the IDA do to help my project, I divide it into two sections, two areas. One, the federal benefits, and the second are the state law benefits. I'll just talk briefly on the state law benefits because I think you're very familiar with those. The state law benefits are exemption from sales tax on the building materials and the equipment, mortgage recording tax exemption, and potential for real property abatement. So that's the New York State benefits that an IDA can convey to a project applicant in connection with undertaking a project. And you've undoubtedly seen that on a fairly regular basis, working with your staff and with Kara on straight lease transactions. So number one, state lease benefit, the state benefits. The federal benefits are a little bit more subtle. And what it basically is, from a boil it down standpoint, is a lower cost of borrowing in connection with particular projects, because the IDA, by being involved in the financing, can issue tax-exempt bonds, and the interest rate on a tax-exempt bond is typically lower than what you would otherwise pay on a conventional loan. And that difference between the taxable rate and the tax-exempt rate is what I characterize or described as the federal benefit. So state law benefits, federal law benefits. The federal law benefits are based on a lower cost of borrowing. Now, before we get into the detail of what types of projects are eligible for tax-exempt financing, the most important things for you to keep in mind, and that get misapplied or misunderstood, is number one, on a tax-exempt bond deal, the IDA is not loaning the money to the project applicant. unless Dave hasn't been forthright to me on the IDA's financial statements, you don't have enough money to lend to these various project applicants for various transactions. Dave sometimes exaggerates issues with me, sometimes pushes me a little bit, but I don't think that you have a $100 million loan fund in the back room where you're in a position to loan money to project applicants. So the bond financing is what is called conduit financing. The IDA is a pipeline, if you will, between the lender and the borrower. The IDA doesn't lend the money, doesn't support the money, doesn't guarantee the money. The IDA simply facilitates a borrowing that the project applicant is able to secure based on the financial strength of the project. And that leads to the next point. By virtue of the IDA being involved, it doesn't mean that the deal is any stronger from a financing standpoint than it would otherwise be. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration because, as you know, most of you have business backgrounds, and you'll know that if you're borrowing at 5% as opposed to 8%, your financials are better, and therefore it's a better credit for the lender. But when the lender looks at a project applicant's project, they're not going to say, "Oh my goodness, the IDA is involved, and therefore a below market or a C credit or a junk credit is now AAA." That's not the case. The deal still has to stand on its own. The IDA provides, benefits in terms of making the deal stronger, but the IDA, because the IDA doesn't stand behind the deal, doesn't have assets in the deal, doesn't guarantee the deal is still stands on its own. And then my third point, and this is probably of the three the most important, is that Warren and Washington County, the counties, do not stand behind the deal. Occasionally I get phone calls saying, "Oh, we want to do XYZ manufacturing company, and we want Warren County to pledge its full faith and credit behind that because we know the taxpayers really want to help us and are willing to pay taxes to pay our debt service." That's a non-starter. It doesn't happen. Doesn't happen in New York. It does happen in other states, not as often as it used to, but it's not part of the deal here in New York State. So before we get into the weeds, the 3 points are: the IDA doesn't have a bag of money that it pulls out to loan. Number 2, the deal has to stand on its own. And number 3, and this will probably come as a relief to the taxpayers of Washington and Warren County, they're not on the hook for any of the financings that you do on behalf of the project applicants. With respect to the actual bond financing, there's 4 typical types of projects that the IDA, that our experience is, that IDAs do. And before we get into that, you'll say, "Well, where is that found, Joe? Where do we know, what book do you look in to find out what can be or cannot be financed with tax-exempt financing?" Well, it's in the Internal Revenue Code. And if you have any trouble sleeping at night, what you want to do is Google section 141 of the Internal Revenue Code, and that outlines a whole series of, I think there's probably 12 or 13, maybe 14 different types of bond or projects that are eligible for tax-exempt bond financing. Of that long list, there are, like I said, 4 that we typically see being done by an IDA or an IDA-related entity. And in no order, no particular basis with respect to the order, the first is not-for-profit bonds. And what is a bond? What is a not-for-profit bond? It's a bond issued under 141, but then you go from 141 to 145, And what that is a bond financing that benefits a 501c3. And it's got to be a 501c3. It can't be a 501c8 or 7 or 2. It's got to be a 501c3. So the typical examples are colleges, hospitals, YMCAs, local private schools, private high schools, private elementary schools. So those are the typical types of projects that we do under that type of bond. And again, the benefit to the not-for-profit is that they're borrowing at a rate lower than the rate that they would otherwise borrow if they did a financing directly with the bank. The second type of bond that you see with tax-exempt bond financings for IDAs are manufacturing bonds. And what that is exactly what it says it is. It's a bond issued for a project that involves the processing or conversion of personal property in connection with the manufacturing process. Unfortunately, and David's had a fair amount of experience in trying to do transactions of that type in your two counties, and accordingly has had conversations with me on this topic, is that it's a fairly involved and detailed and rigorous from a requirement standpoint area of the Internal Revenue Code. And I'll just hit a couple of highlights. One is that you can only finance on a tax-exempt basis the processing portion of a manufacturing facility. So if you have a 100,000 square foot building and 50,000 square foot of it is finished goods storage and raw material storage, and 25,000 square foot of it is machinery, where they take, they have the black box and something comes in one side and it comes out differently the other side. And then you have another 25,000 square feet of the mahogany paneled office for the corporate president. At a starting point, all you can finance at the tax-exempt level is the 25,000 square foot processing portion of the building. There are exceptions for financing a portion of the other parts of the building, but Congress, in its infinite wisdom, has taken, along with the Internal Revenue Code, Revenue Service, has taken a very narrow view on tax-exempt financing. And so whenever they can, they limit the types of projects that are eligible for tax-exempt financing, because again, the federal government looks at tax-exempt bonds as a revenue loser for the federal government. The federal government doesn't collect tax on the interest being paid on the bond, and that lack of federal income tax on that interest is an irritant, frankly, to the federal government, and accordingly, they look very narrowly with respect to the ability of you to finance projects under the Internal Revenue Code.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
So, this is Chuck. A quick question. You said processing, primarily processing only. So as an example, if we have a manufacturer that has a manufacturing process and then they have an automated warehouse, it sounds like the automated warehouse would not necessarily qualify. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. The general rule by way of percentages is 70% needs to go. So if you do a $10 million bond transaction, 70% of the bond deal has to go to core manufacturing. 25% can go to related activity. So finished goods storage, raw material storage, office space that deals with that facility on site. You can't have a central office located there financed with tax-exempt bonds that handles the administration of buildings and facilities located in other jurisdictions or other parts of the state. The other big issue or restriction and that curtails the use of manufacturing bonds is a and the rule is called the $10 million limit. And it's called the $10 million limit because the rule basically limits the amount of a bond that can be issued by an IDA for a manufacturing project to $10 million or less, as you will see as I walk you through how this rule is satisfied or not satisfied. The way to look at it is that in order to determine whether you've complied with the $10 million rule, you have to add up the sum of 3 pots that you've created to analyze the situation. Let's use an example, close to home. Telescope folding furniture in Granville, New York, literally close to home. If Kathy Vanderman called me up and said, "Hey, I want to do a tax-exempt bond financing for our facility in the village of Granville," I would say, "Okay, how much do you want to borrow?" And if she said $8 million, I'd say, "Okay. So what we need to do is do a calculation to see if you are able to satisfy the $10 million rule." And I'm only using Telescope because I'm familiar with the company, given where I grew up. I know Kathy Vanderman, and she's not called me about any of this, so please don't take any of this and run with it. I'm using this only to keep you guys and women attention on this topic. So what we would need to do is look first and say, "Okay, Kathy, how many tax-exempt bonds do you have outstanding now in the town of Granville for your facility?" And presumably she would say no, because to my knowledge, she hasn't done anything in the past with respect to tax-exempt financing. So the number in the first pot would be 0. If she had tax-exempt bonds outstanding, we would have to put that number in that first pot. But let's assume that she has nothing outstanding, so the first pot would be 0. The second pot would be the financing in question. And since she told me that she wants to do $8 million, the second pot would have the number 8 in it. So that's the second pot. The third pot is what is typically trips up the project applicant because it's such an insidious and broad rule. The third pot is you have to add or put in that pot the number of capital expenditures the company has expended 3 years back for that facility located in the town of Granville, and what they expect to spend non-bond related 3 years going forward. So if you have a company that spends, let's say they spend $3 million a year in the normal course of capital expenditures, if you look back 3 years, 3 times 3 is 9. So you put 9 in the pot, and then you look forward and you say, well, they're going to spend another 3 million a year on a going forward basis. So again, that's 3 times 3, that's 9. So 9 plus 9 is 18, and 18 is the number that goes into the pot. So then when you step back and you look at the 3 pots, you have 0 plus 8 plus 18. 8 plus 18 is 26, which is above the $10 million limit. Now, what the service did about 10 years ago is they said, well, that rule is really bad. We really feel bad about that rule. So we're going to give you a break. We're going to allow you to disregard 10 million of capital expenditures. So if we go, so then the calculation is 8 plus 18 equals 26, minus 10 is 16. So you're still over and you still can't do your deal. So when you think about when someone comes to you for a manufacturing bond, the first question you should be thinking is, well, how big is the financing? And number two, how much does this company spend each year by way of capital expenditures? Because if they spend any reasonable amount of capital expenditures on a yearly basis, it's going to be a problem to qualify the deal for tax-exempt financing. That's not to say that you shouldn't call me or call Kara and say, hey, what do you think about this? And then we do some preliminary analysis. But manufacturing bonds are very tough to qualify for because the limits are so small. And just to give you a sense of history, I started working in this area in 1983. That $10 million limit has not changed since 1983. There's been no inflation impact on that number, which is frankly criminal, and our congressmen should get slapped up for that. But that's my personal view on economic development and the federal government. So that's the second type of tax-exempt bonds that the IDA typically entertains. The third type is something that we've seen fairly regularly in upstate cities, and that is low-income housing bonds. And that provision, for those of you, again, who may have trouble sleeping, you'll find in 142 of the Internal Revenue Code. And basically what that is a type of bond that can be issued by an IDA for a housing facility, rental housing facility, that's designed to provide housing for low-income residents. And there are income restrictions and other types of restrictions that need to be satisfied in order to qualify for that type of financing. But that's something that we've seen in a number of upstate cities, City of Albany, City of Buffalo, for instance, and actually we've seen them in several villages also. But that's the third type of bond issue that we've been working on by way of IDAs.
Hey, Joe, another question, if I could. In
Yep.
talking with some housing people, I'm learning that the threshold for these housing bonds tends to be on the higher end, maybe 70, 80, 90, $100 million. Is that an accurate representation that this area doesn't play in the smaller amounts of 10, 20, $30 million? Any
No,
comment on
I would disagree with them on that. I did a tax-exempt bond deal, albeit 20 years ago, but I did a tax-exempt bond deal for $400,000. And everybody went home happy, including the lawyers who got paid at the closing. A lot of it depends on the circumstance and the type of project that's being financed, the terms that are available, how efficient counsel is or inefficient counsel is, and who the parties are. If we're doing a transaction with a large New York City law firm, and they have 5 associates assigned to the transaction, and each of those associates are going to make their bones on how many comments they send us on the documents, the closing costs are going to be much different than if you have an experienced lender's counsel who recognizes what he or she should be negotiating on and what they shouldn't be negotiating on. I mean, to give you an example, it's not a bond financing, but it's a significant straight lease deal that we hope to close this week. A relatively major upstate regional bank hired a Boston, New York law firm, and their fees are in the $500,000 range on a $15 million loan, which I think, frankly, is criminal. but that will give you an example of what I would describe as inefficiency and frankly, poor business planning. So a lot of it depends on, like I said, the particulars of the transaction and getting estimates up front and understanding the structure and what impacts the structure is going to have on the complexity and the cost of the transaction.
And that's good to know, because here in our region, we tend to have the smaller projects. So it's good to hear if we have a 10 or 15, $20 million project that perhaps is still doable. So thank you. Nick, I know you have a question.
I have a question, Joe. Is it too late for me to go to law school? No.
Nick, with your energy and your drive, never too late. Never too late. And I would just know
What
that.
about Braves though?
Oh, no. Business savvy. When I was in law school, I was a backbencher. I think you'll probably be sitting in the front row with your hand up.
So, Joe, on that third type of bonds, is that for profit and nonprofits as well?
Good question. Low income housing, for profit.
And is that, can it be a mix of low income with mix of moderate income? Or
Yeah, and
standalone?
I can't give you the percentages because I just don't remember them off the top of my head, but there is some market rate housing in low income housing facilities, but it's a mix. But it's a significant piece. A significant portion is low income.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Brian?
So is the tax exempt, is it anything that the IDA qualifies, they are all considered tax exempt, or are there some bonds that are not tax exempt that the IDA is involved
Another good question. We do financings where we issue taxable bonds because the project doesn't qualify for tax exempt status. The reason why we haven't done over the years a significant number of taxable bonds is that oftentimes the borrower will say, well, why would I do a taxable bond? Because I've got to pay Joe Scott and his firm, all that money to do a taxable bond set of papers, when why don't I just do bank financing directly with the bank? The interest rate's going to be the same, essentially. And all I've got to do is pay Joe Scott and Kara for the straight lease set of papers to get the New York State benefits. If there's a reason, and sometimes there's a reason for a project applicant that they want to issue taxable bonds, maybe the credit wants to structure the transaction that way. But the short answer is yes, the IDA can do taxable bonds for projects that don't qualify for tax exempt treatment. What we're expecting is, we've done a number of cannabis projects through straight lease transactions, and we're hoping that once the financing requirements that or restrictions that exist at the federal level go away, that might be an avenue for doing some of these larger cannabis projects. But your point is right on, in that you can do taxable bonds, and the benefit of taxable bonds is that when the IDA issues bonds, if it qualifies for tax exempt treatment at the federal level, then there's no federal tax on the interest. But on that same interest, there's no personal income tax for state law purposes. So if you're a taxpayer, an individual holding that bond, you don't pay state tax, and you don't pay City of New York, City of Yonkers, any of the lower municipality income taxes. So what you'll hear your investment banker or financial advisor say is that these bonds are triple tax exempt. They're tax exempt at the federal level, the state level, and the local level.
Where did the burn plan sit? Where's that, well, this, the burn plan we did? Where
Sorry?
did the burn plan fit in terms of bonds? What kind, how?
Trash plan.
The trash plan.
The trash plant, yes. Well, that was, and you and I,
So Joe,
I'm sorry, Ed.
wasn't that bonded by the counties, which made it tax exempt?
no, it went through the IDA, but that's my fourth version. So you and I practiced my routine before this meeting, and that was a great segue to the last portion of what I wanted to talk about. So the last portion is solid waste disposal. So that was the burn plant. Now I really don't want to get into the detail of the burn plant, but we have done a number of those projects, and what those projects involve is the disposal of solid waste. And again, if you look at the Internal Revenue Code, and it's been a while since I did one of those. I think that's in 142 of the code also, 142 or 141. But that type of project that involves the disposal of waste, namely something that has no value when it goes into the black box, is eligible for financing with the proceeds of tax-exempt bonds. The tax-exempt analysis is fairly rigorous on that also, like manufacturing bonds. And it is something that we've done with a number of our IDA clients, typically in the paper disposal, and I'm trying to think what else. No, it's been primarily in paper disposal. But see, the problem is that, waste paper has, I haven't looked for some time, but one of the issues is getting the input that has no value other than the transportation cost, So that's part of the analysis that you have to apply to the transaction in order for the transaction to qualify for tax-exempt financing. So those are the four typical types that you see with IDAs: not-for-profit bonds, manufacturing bonds, low-income housing, and solid waste disposal bonds. Other things that you'll see are things like, airport bonds or wharf bonds. For instance, one of our clients is matter of public record is the Airport Authority, and we do we've done the parking garages around the airport, and we've done some of the terminal activity, and because of the use of some of the terminal activity by the airlines, you need to qualify these bonds under some different provisions under the Internal Revenue Code. So and that's just another example. Another one is we represent the port here in the city of Albany, and have been working with them on those large windmill offshore wind renewable energy projects. And one of the things we've been looking at is financing the wharf construction through tax-exempt bonds. So there are other transactions available, but the typical, like I said, is low-income housing, manufacturing, not-for-profit, and solid waste disposal. And sorry, Dave, I'm well over my limit, but
Brian had a question.
I'm gonna attribute it to the questions I was getting that dragged out this presentation.
One last question. So you said there's a limit on the amount of money and things like that. Is there a way that some is taxable and some is non-taxable?
Absolutely. Now, the only one that has the limit is manufacturing bonds, right? I talked about the $10 million limit. But yeah, I mean, we, give you an example. Let's see, what's a good one? Well, a good one is, here's a good one. We do a project through your CDC for the hospital. And we, they build a brand new wing, and it's going to be occupied by the hospital. Well, actually, a better example, we do a parking garage for the hospital. For instance, we've done, if you go to Albany Med, you see those actually three big parking garages. We did all those parking garages. Well, suppose Glens Falls Hospital called us up and said, "Hey, we want to do a parking garage. It's $15 million. It's 6 stories, but we want to rent 2 of the floors long term to a doctor's group." Well, at the very beginning, when I was talking about not-for-profit bonds have to be owned and occupied by a 501c3. If 2 floors of that 6th floor garage is leased exclusively to a for-profit doctor's, practice group, well, that flunks that test. But what we could do is we could do, 3 floors tax exempt with tax exempt bonds and 2 floors with taxable bonds. So, yeah, there's all sorts of creative things that we can apply here. The big takeaway, the last takeaway I'll give you, I gave you the 4 at the beginning, 4 or 3, sorry. The big takeaway is always call. If someone has an idea, talk to your senior staff, and hopefully they'll call us. We'd love to be involved, and we're happy to brainstorm on projects.
All right, well, thanks, Joe, and we're gonna have another presentation in January sometime, maybe
Sure.
February from Joe, a little more formal. So we can open up more. So thank you, Joe. I appreciate your time, and we'll connect on another matter.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's time of year to get to your office. I hope you got a desk there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Have a good holiday, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks, Joe.
So
Yep.
treasurer report.
Yeah, so you have before you the accounts payable and the profit and loss along with the balance sheet. I would open it up to anybody's questions.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the accounts payable approval.
Move it.
Moved by Brian, do I have a second?
Second.
Juan. Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, wait a minute, that's gotta be roll call. Let's go over.
Nick Romano,
Yes.
Ginny Sullivan.
Yes.
Juan Gonzalez.
Yes.
Brian Campbell. Dan Bruno,
Yes.
Mike Leggett,
Yes.
Dave O'Brien.
Yes. Carried. Year-to-date financial report? Anything you want to highlight there?
What, year-to-date financial, is that part of the agenda?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the balance sheet and income statement, which I skipped over. Yeah, that, again, if anybody has any questions, I don't have any presentation tonight. I'd be happy to try to answer them, or Ally would work with me to answer them for you at a later date.
Any questions?
I always forget we do those separate.
Okay,
All right.
next. Canal side master plan update, Mr. Bruno.
Yes. I don't have much to report. RFP, final phase, if you will. We met with Bella on December 5th. Got the DEC review and approval of the final design, what that will entail. Not really sure right now, but the Fast North grant is 3 to 4 months out for an actual award of money. Water master plan
report, Matt Plan report, I'm sorry. We haven't received it yet. I think we have since that meeting. Dollar will furnish a final invoice by the end of this month for their work.
Final?
Well, I don't know if it's final, is a good question. We talked about that. Final, and then the final, I think, will be in January, is that?
That's my consideration. They still got some things to finish up,
Yeah.
as far as I know. So we'll see.
Chuck, did you have anything to add there?
No, I'm good.
So we.
I do, but let you finish. Go ahead.
No, I'm gonna go ahead.
For those intimately involved, this would be a great time to do your survey if you haven't done that yet. But for the board members that are not intimately involved, last time you had an update was 20 November. So we did have an internal meeting on 27 November, just the staff trying to get heads up of what's going on with Fast New York. Then on the 29th, we met with the regional planning board to again discuss some more. We're still a little early at the time because our meeting with ESD was not till the 4th of December, which they gave us a great input, which Dan had mentioned that the 4-month process to get through their 2 boards and their public hearings. So we are currently working on that application. On the 5th, as Dan mentioned, we wrapped up with Canal Side on the pre-engineering stuff. They still have a few things to work out. On the 6th, we updated the executive team at that time where we were at that point. On the 11th of December, we had another internal Fast New York meeting. On the 5th or the 14th of December, one of our takeouts was a 5-year projection. We worked on that with the treasurer. Again, on the 18th here, 30 minutes before the full board meeting, we were working on that as well. So quite a few meetings weekly, slow down a little bit during the holidays, but there's just a lot of information. Right now, the engineers are a little antsy because it's the pre-stuff and you start, funding, not funding. Project managers are licking their lips because this is a fun time if you're a project manager, putting the chess pieces in play before you execute. So lots of fun. But I just wanted to give the fuller update to those that are not involved intimately. Great.
The 5-year projection is that for the Canal Side itself with?
No, that is for the IDA,
For the IDA.
for the Fast New York application, there was
Okay.
14 items that we had to provide. One of them was a 5-year projection.
Okay.
Well, actually, there was 19 of those. Regional Planning Board taking most of those. We had a few of those that we had to help them out with.
So on an overall basis, like I said, Fast New York is getting the information. We hope to get the information to them by the 10th of January, which means we meet their first internal check in January, the board meeting. From there, it goes to public hearings. From there, it goes to the,
And this will be public hearings in Fort Edward or in
No, this will be
Washington,
public
Warren
hearings in-
County?
no, Albany,
Oh,
with ESD. It's ESD's public
Sure.
hearings, not ours. It's what they have to go through for the grant process ESD has set up. I'm not sure what it is, so while we have initial indication we're gonna have it, we still have to go through all these approvals, then has to go to the budget authority for final approval, and then that process will probably wrap up in April, I believe is the last. That's we're trying to hit the area. In parallel, we're doing the RFP, so we hope to release the RFP for engineering construction in the 1st of February.
Right, so I was gonna say they're about
They're about,
in February.
Right.
Put it that way. We didn't
So-
want to do it too soon before receiving funding.
right.
or you see the whites of their eyes.
If we get the RFP in process, whatever Bob Holmes charged, we can use that under the HUD stuff to do, so we can get reimbursed on the HUD stuff.
And the
So we
RFP,
hope to get the RFP out. It'll be for final design and construction management.
and that's funded under the FAST.
That will be jointly funded under HUD and FAST.
Yeah, so they'll
So
merge
go-
right in. The contract will come through to be signed with the money and you'll be able to sign with whatever contractor.
So if we end up letting the RFP, we'll get the RFP from back in March. We'll have 30 days to review it, responses back, see if we got anything. Within that, then we would sort of dovetail with that April timeframe to be able to let the contract. So we'll see. We don't know what the engineering is. We don't know what the breakdown in costs will be over the course until we get that final bid down. But the difference, what we're doing is we're doing a request for proposal now. We did an RFQ with Labella. The RFQ with Labella was done because we weren't sure what we fit into. And so it was more open-ended. So when we do this, with this program, Regional Planning Board will do the administration. We have $100,000 budget for them to do the region, to do the administration of it. The balance, because we're doing RFP, is very detailed of what they're gonna do. We laid out what they're gonna do in the proposal. You know, they'll be managing the project, and then we were sort of managing Labella because Labella lost a lot of people. Hopefully, that when we select the engineering firm, we're gonna make sure that they'll be able to commit to get it done. The other thing we have with that is MWBE requirements. That's part of it. And, you know, hopefully when we select the engineering firm to manage all this for us, we're gonna make sure they have the ability to do it.
They will have that. They need to include that in
Yeah.
their proposal.
To a certain
And it's
percentage.
30%.
Is that 30%?
30%.
30%.
Overall project,
Kept raising it.
not
over the past few
individually
years.
between
Now
engineering and construction.
30%. Now, there is a process where if we can't find competitive MWBE firms, there are waivers, but they're hard to
you have
get,
to
and I don't know.
demonstrate your due
That
diligence.
you weren't able to get one.
Advertise, et cetera.
And we don't know how ESD is working with us. We do have a special MWBE consultant.
Yeah.
That's assigned to us for this, so they'll go on there, so more to come. I don't want to make any commitments, but I don't want to lose any time because it's important to get this project done. We have some decision points to make. Decision point is gonna be, are we gonna do sewer first or water first? Is the economic benefit to do them both at once there? But we also have to manage cash flow, which is why we need to be careful about our cash flow, because if we do an interest, even though we're getting quarterly payments, it's still gonna be 90 days, get it, get your bills paid, get the information back, so we have to plan that process, probably 60, 90 days to get the money, so we're gonna float money for probably 180 days. We hope not to raise interest, which is protecting our cash position is very important to us, because if we can fund it and pay ourselves interest, or not pay interest, we're much better off, because it's gonna be probably 8% interest, $100,000 to $300,000 in interest of loan, if we have to flood it over there. So we're
How much?
I figure $100,000 to $300,000 in interest if we have to float it too long.
For how long?
180 days.
That would be.
No, I-
For
Total
forever.
for the
until
entire
you-
project, $100,000 to
Buys it
$300,000.
down.
Every
Yeah.
quarter.
Yeah.
You have to.
Now, it's gonna go like this. I'm not sure what the
Yeah.
graph is, but the graph is gonna be your engineering costs are gonna go like this. Then your construction cost and preparation is gonna go up like this. So then the cash flow is gonna go, it's gonna graph.
Bell curve.
So that's what we're looking for.
Construction's gotta be.
So
Have to borrow.
it's a challenge, but hopefully we can minimize.
We might have to most likely borrow during the construction phase, yes.
Yeah, borrowed but reimbursable.
Short term, yeah, it would be secured by the grant. They would just take the grant receivable.
Okay.
So within this, while we have the,
Rates might drop by then.
well, we hope so.
And they have gone down there, but won't be in the
Hope
last
so.
couple of weeks.
But we hope that our involvement on, as much as we did in Labella, our involvement will be less than it has been. I'm not saying we're not gonna have oversight, but we're not gonna have to dig in like we have with that. And Dan and Juan will be sort of masterminding it all the way through there, so.
And it's this, excuse me, this RFP should lend itself to that because it's more detailed, more specific. So you have more leverage, if you will, over the firm to contract with, do the final design and construction manager.
And basically be simplistic, when we looked into this, we didn't know what route the sewer is gonna take. We didn't know what route the water is gonna be taken, because Canal Corp should have said, and DOT could have said, you can't go down by the canal. We may have to come over through, Fort Edward on actually what is, I can't remember the name of the road now, come down through there, which would
Not
be
East
more,
Street.
much more expensive. East Street would have been complicated by the fact that East Street, if you start digging there, You've got problems with infrastructure, you got problems with old pipes, you got problems with old sewer. You know, so all of a sudden the price tag jacks up by quite a bit.
Would you say what LaBelle has done is actually covered the aspects of a feasibility study? So that when it's all written up on those water,
It goes
wastewater,
beyond
both.
feasibility stuff. I mean, it's
But-
actually engineering and, cost estimate.
So is it enough
Archaeological-
information for us to see
Archaeological
it
and other stuff.
and then say, yes, it's worth it for doing the water and the wastewater together, or
I
we
think
have,
we're gonna get that. I don't think that is good enough. I think we get to final design and engineering at the point.
Yes.
There's still some decision points we have to make in the water.
oh, okay.
I think sewer is less because actually it's burying a
Yeah.
pipe and you got a sump pump, you got a pump and, I can't remember. what the
Force
other one is.
main up
Force
to
main,
the, connection with the, Washington County Sewer District to dump into that manhole, I think we're connecting to.
on Baldwin Ave.
So, this first phase is, like I said, it's more of a feasibility study. It's a 90%, so to speak, of engineering. if you will. This RFP is for the final, which will create final bid documents. It's to finish that and, do the construction management, construction procurement.
So we will design for both the wastewater
Well,
and.
We got preliminary design done. We're talking about final design.
Right,
yeah, the final design for both will be done.
okay.
And from that, we can determine
I
through
gotcha.
bids, whether it's feasible to do. I suspect it is. It depends on how, the bid respond. You know, normally you'd say, yes, there's one construction company, because it's all pipe work,
Yep.
pretty much, would do both. And it's more, you know, your things like mobilization,
Yep.
manpower, all that are less than bidding them separate. There's.
I'm not outlawing it. I'm just saying we just don't know enough right now to get down to the details. Okay, any questions on that? Oh, you remind me, stop. Okay, good. Any other questions on that? Tenant activity.
On tenant activity, everything is going fine with our three tenants, although for our SMS rail folks, they would like some more grain shipments. It's been very light in the fourth quarter due to the dynamics of the industry they serve. We have had 4 different parties express interest in the site. We've had one out of Washington County, one out of Rochester, one through ESD, they're out of Germany, and another group that was a metal recycling facility out of the US. We provide information, we do tours, and sometimes we never hear from them. I'm not suggesting we have anything new. That's a for sure opportunity, but there continues to be interest in the site.
And the one objection they always have.
Lack of sewer.
Yep.
As far as projects on site, the executive park group is aware that the fence job has been completed. Matter of fact, thank you for the accounts payable because it includes the final payment for the fence job. So that's now behind us. And the other thing I mentioned is that we've had a complaint from neighbors about the lights that Kiewit uses for the real security lights. We went and looked at the lights. We went and talked to Kiewit. They adjusted the lights and everything is okay. And our neighbors now are very happy. That's an outside unless there are any questions.
The other thing we're setting up is a meeting about the bridge. Coordinating schedule with, Washington County, with the engineer and with Kiewit, to make sure we have a path forward, meet needs. So Juan's taking care of setting that up. Unfinished business, Fast New York. I think Juan covered it. We've done our Fast New York. We just got to get the information in so we can get out to the site. We just took the dovetailed budgets we've just done in 2024 and just extended it out based on what we're doing. So again, it's just an estimate. We need to get in there. Any questions on that? There is a question when CHP is going to be done. which reflect our $2 million payment. More importantly, the payments to the communities. When they're done, I don't know. They're behind schedule. A lot of it's because of the state limits of work and all the things they put on there. They will be going to escalating their work next year. They're talking about 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. So what that does, I don't know. I have not talked to them directly. It just came through some other sources. New business. Executive meeting, we have a conflict for the 3rd of January. We're going to postpone we're going to hold the executive meeting. Where's my calendar? My calendar is January. We're going to try and do it on I got to go to 2024. The 9th, which is a Tuesday. So please look at us and see if 9 o'clock on the 9th works for you. I don't know of any meetings I have, but there's other people have meetings. So if we can pencil it in for the 9th.
Good for me.
Unfortunately, Carrie's out of town. Juan's out of town, so I don't want to have people punish people by missing this. I think it's an important meeting.
I'm out of town.
On the 9th?
I'm not-
What about the 10th?
Not here on the tenth.
Well, that's gotta be the 9th.
If anything, I'd be coming back on the tenth.
Okay.
But I bought only a one-way ticket, so I might be coming back on the 14th.
Never coming back.
Depends on what you run into when you're out there.
That's right.
Okay,
So what are we saying?
so pencil the 9th,
Night at what? 9?
9th at 9,
Or CARES office?
Carrie's office.
Yeah.
Board evaluations. Some people haven't submitted the board evaluations. Please do it.
Where we at, number wise?
5.
5 of 10?
Am I one of
Guilty
those?
parties.
Did I
Well,
put
no,
my name?
not 10, you
I
won't
have
have.
not received yours.
Sure.
Well, you're holding yourself accountable, so we appreciate that. We always appreciate that.
Yeah.
So 5 of 10 or 5 of 9, actually?
5 and 9, 5 of 8. Did you see Mark Smith at all?
Yeah, I did.
Do you have anything to say or?
He's not been feeling well lately.
Here,
Email?
Thanks. Maybe this was for the LBC.
Maybe
So-
another one.
Anybody else need one? No, actually.
so moving on to, bylaw changes. The last meeting we had a discussion about bylaw.
Bylaws.
I was waiting to have everyone's concentration. Bylaws, we had a discussion about bylaws. There's 2 things we wanted to accomplish. Bylaw changes, I gotta admit, Juan has been excellent in pointing out things that we are not really following the bylaws in. And the 2 things we were looking at was committees and if we had a COO position. When we reviewed the bylaw changes, we found that the committee change is already covered by our audits and different materials that Kara was kind enough to provide in background, but thanks to Juan, he found that, we were out of compliance, so we have altered our committees. Worked closely with Juan to do that, so we're not only forecasting recently, we're forecasting what's gonna happen after, in the future too. Maybe some minor changes, but we need to get into the bylaws. There's some things in the bylaws we gotta change. I think we need to start working on that. We also have to have the governance committee look at the current policies for our February meeting. So that needs to take place also. And of course, audit and finance has to take place for Paris too. So preventative to make sure we're meeting our needs.
How we've gone through those standing policies before every year.
We have pointed them out, but I think Ally sent out the list of what we need to cover and send them out, I think, didn't you? For the policies we need to review every year, we have to,
For our annual?
yeah,
For the past few years, It just states that the policies are on the website to review.
Yep.
Do you mean, do I physically attach them in
No,
the email?
no,
Oh.
do we go through chapter and verse and go, well, this is still applies, so this needs to
Oh,
be changed.
gotcha.
We updated our
No.
policies and bylaws a year ago, and we went through the entire
Yeah.
list of everything.
And I'm thinking the governance committee should do that outside of the annual committee meeting,
Right, I
so we
agree.
come and we got there.
Yeah,
I have looked with the things Kara's provided me. I saw some highlights of things we need to deal with. So we need to do that. And our problem was we had the executive committee doing everything. That wasn't right.
yes. Mhm.
Juan pointed that out. He said he's found that challenge in other organizations. And I thank Juan for finding those. And he's helped make changes in other organizations so it more complies to it. And also gets other people involved in it. So that's the reason for the changes, in terms of that. So any questions on that? After 12 years here, you know, it's hard to read things and see them differently. Becky, I can't talk to you.
Can you shut that off?
So, okay. But those are reasons for it, and Juan's been very helpful in identifying these, a fresh set of eyes. You know, I read the same thing every time. I think I've read the bylaws probably 50 times and probably didn't see these things because I'm so used to the way it was. Any other questions? Nominations will be held at the January meeting for office for next year. We have a 7880 Main Street resolution for sales tax and increase and extension. Sorry that was late. We went off on the 30th. Went on the 31st, so we need to renew that. Carol lately provided the resolution. Sorry it was late, but we were waiting for them and they didn't get back to us. Chuck has been after them, Kara's been after them. They finally got back to us. I think it was Thursday or Friday that they needed that extension.
But
So I need-
we just got the numbers this morning, so.
Okay, so I hate to send out lately, but we'll go from there. 708080 Main Street resolution for sales tax increase. You've got that. I need a motion to put that on the floor. Motion by Dan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Tim. Any further discussion?
Remind us what the project is again?
That's the one on, Main Street, the apartments with
Housing,
retail.
mixed-
and the
mixed use.
Okay.
Mixed use. It's
Right
got
across from
apartments
Mount
in
Olive
office.
Trust.
Financing by MBT Bank, and so people think we're putting a branch there. They don't even say. I've gotten so many calls. I'm like, no, we're not putting a branch there. It's financed by us.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I was gonna wait for that.
Really, if you're gonna be operating a branch.
That's right.
We are not, and it's not my deal.
No, you
but
were
I-
you were called Ginny earlier, so you could vote. You'd have to stay.
Proposed subdivision for WCC conveyance, if everyone remembers, or most people remember. That back in the day, before we took over the property, the Port of LPDC gave an option agreement for 20 years to WCC for a strip of land that is basically wetlands, but it is covered at the two entrances to the wharf. So basically, Canal Corp will be controlling the entrances and they'll have a sub in there. So we don't have we've had discussions about this and they do require an appraisal. This does not have to go for ADO to 90 days because it's under $100,000. They finally gave us the subdivision application and stuff to go out. I think Chuck forwarded it Friday when he saw it, so we got it late. We still need the appraisal. Kara, should we do this, sign the paperwork for subdivision? Or should we wait till the appraisal comes back to see if we need to do anything with ADL?
Well, I think you can get that subdivision started. I mean, it won't be effectuated until everything is filed. So that just gets them in front of the planning board. So or the municipality, however they're handling it. I don't know if they're doing it administratively or not. John Lapper forwarded me an email this morning from Matt Steve saying that they had everything prepared and ready to submit, but they can't submit it without your signature. So I would go ahead and authorize them to get before them. Otherwise, it'll just be delayed until you sign it. They can't submit without your authorization.
Okay.
But they won't be able to finalize the subdivision until you sign the transfer documents.
Okay, thank you. So we have given the language on our access in and out of that property. And that has to be completed and agreed to before I'll even sign anything. Or I should say the board will allow me to sign anything.
A permanent easement.
They don't want a permanent easement. They are doing a 5-year rotating. They say, what happens if we sell the property? So.
That's valid. The easement goes with it.
What? Usually,
The easement goes with it.
yeah, that's why an easement works.
They are against the permanent easement, I can tell you that.
Okay, so right now we own the land. They have an option on that land.
Correct.
They're exercising that
Mhm.
option.
What is that?
And they're saying, we get no easement. How can that be? Don't we say you get that,
I'll defer to the council.
or we retain an easement?
I'll defer to council.
I'm gonna have to look at the terms of that option agreement to see I don't recall that it had any sort of requirement, right? But our property doesn't become landlocked as a result, right?
Except from the canal to the wharf.
Yeah, if we wanted to own the
Right.
wharf, we'd be cut off.
Yeah,
But we also talked about the bridge project using the East Street exit as a temporary exit.
still using the wharf for any industrial development.
We kind of need it.
And then if people can't get across that little strip of land, that doesn't behoove us.
I'll go back and look at that option and see what the language is, but I don't recall that having an easement requirement in the terms of that option.
It also includes that.
Is it something we can ask for?
We've already asked for it.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't sign anything till we know what we're talking about.
Right, can I see that?
So what if it's delayed? Let it be delayed.
It started this last January, so.
Yeah.
In a hurry.
I mean, I'd like to know what,
Transference? Are you saying the exercise, the option started last
Yeah,
January?
the option started last January
yeah,
or February, one of the others.
Yeah, they submitted that a while back.
Okay, so you need to go back to them to say that the board is waiting for an acceptable travel between, here and there. Session agreement on access through those two areas.
Yeah, permanent.
Okay.
Anything further than this cannot be said in public.
How much is the,
$50,000
Yeah.
for useless property other than?
access point.
Meanwhile, the buyer of the option has full access across is it public road or does it come in onto
Comes in
canal side?
it comes in on canal side, which they already have an easement on that piece of property, on that road that goes around there. They have an easement to access all their properties.
A permanent easement. Yeah. Permanent.
So,
It also ties up that on the south end that we're using for, proposing to use for Hewitt when the bridge is being replaced.
Yeah.
So. And as you've stated, if you didn't do anything, you wouldn't have access to the wharf.
Okay, so we'll talk tomorrow, Carol.
Okay,
Okay?
How much was the tax bill we paid on that land?
We don't,
900.
1.2, but that had nothing to do with them
Well, it had
Well-
everything to do with them.
in a roundabout way.
Who owned the land?
Who owned the land? Yeah. WCC owned the land. They transferred it forwarded to the local property development corporation. The court gave that property to us.
Yeah, so Carol, we need to know if there's any chance that that easement that they've got with it didn't, why it wouldn't have transferred to us too.
So that option is binding, in other words, they have this option. they're actually-
Yes.
They're trying to, yeah.
Binding option. We inherited it. So, okay. We'll talk tomorrow. So meanwhile, that is postponed until resolution. Thank you.
okay.
Educational, we are going to, again, have more bond from council. We're gonna attempt to do a couple things educationally. Again, have some moments here, but because we get extended meetings, and we're gonna have try separate educational hours and let people do it. We're working with Kara to set up a schedule on that, so we can have separate times when people can come and listen, or maybe we could even do a Zoom meeting that people could listen to it. I think that would work best.
Yeah, record it. Yeah.
Record it,
Give us an opportunity.
so it gives us opportunity. Okay.
We actually did it tonight anyway.
Had one.
Joe.
Well, there was, yeah.
Yeah, tonight we did it anyway with Joe.
Well, Kara was gonna do it, but she had some dental work done, so, she didn't wanna be out on, so we got Joe.
Look at that beautiful smile. Now she
Got my
knows-
tea, got my tea.
Okay. Staff report?
We could have done.
Okay, on the staff report, I'm just gonna try to limit my comments to things that have not yet been talked about. Going through what has occurred since our last board meeting on November 29th, went to the ARC State of Washington County event, including Mr. Campbell, who was on the panel talking about the state of Washington County.
We made the business review today.
I did.
A lousy picture, Brian.
He's got a suit and tie.
Probably look like me.
See that. Maybe it wasn't.
The picture was awful faded and washed out.
Oh.
That's
Just
why I
look
said
like me,
lousy
it's no
picture.
big deal.
I will comment that it was, Brian, it was really well done. It sort of humanized government a little bit. Some of the tough issues that government officials deal with. It was actually really well done.
And I had my name tag on that said guest to Dave O'Brien. So we were good.
How'd I get to you? Is that what
It was left, it was left from the
Council
furniture. No, it wasn't.
Oh, Brian.
Moving on,
Yeah.
moving on, sorry. All right, on the 30th, went to the SC Saratoga Economic Development Corp holiday event in Saratoga, met the new CEO, Greg Connors. We are actually going to have a follow-up lunch to talk about collaboration between the counties. On the 5th of December, had a lunch meeting with local banker who introduced me to a representative of alternative financing to help me sometimes dealing with prospective tenants or prospective clients of ours who don't quite qualify for bank financing, perhaps could qualify for this alternative type financing. So very helpful introduction.
Got one for you.
Got one for me? Okay, we'll talk.
Did you get paid in Bitcoin?
Nobody gets paid anything. It's just building relationships. On the 6th, I actually attended the M&T Bank holiday event in Albany. Actually spent a long time talking with M&T Bank person that specializes in IDA, tax exempt bond financing, and might be helpful for us for future projects. On the 7th, attended the ARC holiday mixer at Fort William Henry Carriage House. There were a lot of people there. That was a hugely successful event. On the 18th in the morning, the SUNY Adirondack and ARCC had distinguished alumni awards, and there were many business leaders there and actually picked up on a lead project, helping with a medical device manufacturer. On the 13th, had lunch with a Finch representative, again, building relationships with some of our local large manufacturers. Then on the 14th, I went to another M&T Bank holiday event. This time it was in Saratoga. There were representatives from Glens Falls Hospital, Benacchio, and one of our new applicants, all there at the party. So it's a very beneficial event. On this past Friday, attended the EC holiday event here in Glens Falls. And that, of course, was well attended by many business leaders. And then today I had lunch with a business owner at Airport Industrial Park. So between the holiday events and the one-on-one activities, there's been a lot going on. As far as our pipeline list, we have 2 draft applications, it'd be a small projects, only about $1 million each, that Ally and I are working on. The applications aren't yet ready or suitable for further processing, so we continue to work with the applicants to get them in better shape. One is a housing project, mixed-use housing, another is a recreation-based projects. We have 3 new interests, one with a hotel, one with a medical service provider, and one with a site developer. More to come on that. We've had preliminary discussions, we provide applications, and we expect further conversations. As far as my pipeline, having projects that we know applications are being done versus projects not, we have 5 entities that we're expecting applications from. We have 11 that I call, 8 that I call likely applications, but the applicant is spending a little bit more time deciding what to do or not to do. We have 11 entities that are exploring applications, and then we have 16 that are inactive. They were active one time, but no longer are active. So that's an update on what's happening with our project pipeline. Any questions?
The park itself is it many properties left? There's a couple left, right?
It's on the Airport Industrial Park. Yeah, this business owner is actually in Airport 1, phase 1, but in phase 2, we're of course working with wetland delineation and subdivide. And then when we're done at the end of Ferguson Road, we're going to have 12 to 15 acres that's going to be developable with utilities. But that will be the remaining site once we're done with the subdivision.
And so none of them are looking at that you have in the pipeline at the moment, or?
No, but our chairman is aware of someone who's interested in some of the other sites.
We have someone interested in potentially 2 or 3 lots.
Okay.
They know it's delineation, they have a place very close to there. And they're looking for outside storage and potentially developing it for further expansion.
I just think when we get the report, it might be nice to know if they're on property we own or if they're not, I guess. When he's talking about.
What he's referring to is property we own, and this 12 acres is property we own.
Right, but I mean, when you were talking about the other ones, the applicants, a lot of them aren't on property. we own. I'm just trying to differentiate the zone.
Applicants are involved with the airport.
Right, that's all I was.
We're gonna have to take a good hard look at those lots left. When we had one property look at it, they were concerned about the topography. So we'll have to take a look at that. Transporting 34,000 cubic yards of dirt from canal site over there would be hugely expensive to level the land off and still be questionable whether it's developable. So, we might want to consider looking at the potential of putting a solar farm in there and deriving income to pay everything out there. So that's still to be looked at. Topography I just found out about, when the sausage company was looking at it. So we did get back the meets and bounds for the what I call the Wild West property that we're going to sell to Dan Collum for $10,000. So I got that back. We're still waiting for the Mylar. Bob Holmes has got to review the meets and bounds, make sure they're right before we get the Mylar built. Then it's a transaction with Hudson Falls. We'll do the sign up on it. That is administrative lot line adjustment. And then we'll divest ourselves of it and move on. So I've got all the information. I've got to go down and talk to Kingsbury assessor. Because with the new having vacant land there, doesn't matter what it was, we're not paying any taxes on it with the new fees for sewer down there. That alarms, we need to find a way to, if we can't sell the properties because they're deed restricted, the property's not worth much. You know, they're probably right now assessed, I got all the numbers, I can't remember the numbers, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 for some of those properties. We need to get that reduced because the new ad valorem is going to be based on acreage. So, okay. Anything else? Okay, any public comment? I don't hear anything, so. Other than that, any other business come before the board? I hope you have all a Merry Christmas and safe travels for those traveling.
Thank you, you too.
Yeah.
Everybody at the table.
Speaking of Wild West, have you been riding horses today?
So.
No.